Good morning, everyone. This is Julie McDonald with Microcom Technologies, and I'd like to thank all of you for attending today's webinar with HPE Network On. Today's David Wynn, and he is their manager of North America, and he'll be presenting today. If anyone has any questions, please submit them in the question box, and David will answer them at the end of today's presentation. David, thank you so much for being with Microcom today. We greatly appreciate it. I am finished for now. Please go ahead and take it on over.
Great, thanks, Julie. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining the webinar today. Today, I'm going to talk about our latest release for HPE Networking Instant On, which is our 3.2 update. So the meat of the presentation will be all of the new features that we've added with this update. But before I get into that, I do want to give a quick refresher for anybody here who is completely new to Instant On and may not know who we are and what we are and what we do. With Instant On, we created this product line probably around 5 to 6 years ago with the intention of making a very kind of focused portfolio for the SMB market. If you know anything about HPE and even HPE Aruba, we've got a lot of business on the enterprise side of the market, but we've never really had a product line that addressed kind of the needs of the SMB market in a cost-effective way, right? So, we gave birth to Instant On about 5 or 6 years ago to do that. So I'm going to kind of go over the key kind of benefits of Instant On to kind of walk you through our value proposition. So in terms of deployment, we want to make Instant On as easy as possible to deploy and configure. So simplicity is definitely in mind in terms of the way you manage the product. So we support a web portal and a mobile app. It's completely the same experience between the two. And we allow you to manage up to 125 network devices per network site, which is a lot. So in terms of scale, you can scale as small or as large as you want. Everything is cloud-based, cloud-native. So it doesn't really matter whether you're deploying 1 access point for a small deployment or deploying 50 access points for a larger deployment. It's really the same experience with our platform. In terms of security, we get a lot of our security posture from the enterprise side of the house because a lot of the hardware and the underlying software for our products for Instant On are based on designs that we created in the enterprise. So I would say that compared to the competition in this space, our security posture and our security story is probably at the top compared to everybody else because of that experience that we have in the enterprise. So a lot of our designs, a lot of our products are truly validated and hardened by the experience that we have deploying these same designs in really, really large logos and large customers. In terms of performance, all of our Wi-Fi access points are Wi-Fi certified. So we never release an access point that isn't Wi-Fi certified. And I know a lot of our competitors save cost here by not certifying their products. We always certify our products. And also our PoE switches are Ethernet Alliance certified. So in terms of testing, validation, again, with the experience that we have on the enterprise side of the house, our products are very well built from day one. A lot of our competitors, when they release new products, it's almost like it's a beta product until they get it right in 2 or 3 firmware updates. That isn't so with our products. They really start working very, very well from day one. And a lot of our partners and our customers like that about our product. In terms of fees, there are no hidden fees to use the cloud management. It's completely free to use. And in terms of our support package, we have a very comprehensive support package out of the box as well. We give you 24/7 phone support for the first 90 days that you onboard the device to our cloud. And then from there, for the remainder of the warranty, you get unlimited chat. And for our access points, that's 2 years. And for our switches, that's limited lifetime, which really means whenever we announce the end of sale of a switch, it'll be that plus 3 years. And then lastly, we're just a really trusted vendor in this space. Like I mentioned, if you don't know anything about HPE Aruba, Aruba Networks was acquired by HPE in 2015. And since then has been a leader in the networking space, even globally, really number 2 only behind Cisco. So we've got a lot of experience in the networking space, and that translates to a very, very good product in our install portfolio as well. And here's a snapshot of our access point lineup. So I'm just going to go very, very quickly from left to right here. For our indoor access points, we've got everything from low to medium density applications all the way up to higher density applications. So if you've got a situation where you need to deploy an access point for a high client density area, I would recommend our AP25. It's our 4x4, so it's going to give you the best total Wi-Fi performance out of all of our indoor access points. If you have a requirement for Wi-Fi 6E, then that's when you step down to an AP32, which is our only Wi-Fi 6E access point in the lineup. And then from there, if you're deploying in a low to medium density environment, then that would be our AP22. In fact, our AP22 is our best seller globally out of the category. And then lastly, if you need something that's just kind of an entry-level Wi-Fi 6 access point for a very small deployment, then that's when I would look at the AP21. But you can kind of make your decision on which access point you want to use, depending on the use case and depending on the client density. Now, we also have a desk / wall mounted access point, and this is a little bit different from our other access points because it's semi-directional. It's not omnidirectional, so you want to deploy it at the end or the edge of the coverage area, pointing towards the area that you want to cover and not towards the center of the coverage area like our indoor access points. The other unique factor about this particular access point is that it supports 4 Ethernet downlink ports, so you can connect also wired devices to this access point. And it can support 2 15-watt PoE devices on those 4 ports. In order for you to get the PoE out functionality though, you have to make sure that you're providing enough power to the access point. So we do sell 2 different versions of this access point. One with an AC power adapter bundle that you can use to give it enough power, or if you buy the version that does not include the AC power adapter, then you need to make sure that you're connecting it to a PoE injector or switch that's giving at least 60 watts of power in order for you to get that PoE functionality out. Otherwise, if you give it anything less than that, then it'll just be enough to power the access point and not the PoE out functionality. And then lastly, we've got one outdoor access point, our AP27, and I know you can't really see it here in this deck, but the size of it, it's really like the size of a small baby. It's very well built. It's much larger than most other outdoor access points that are on the market for this space. It's IP67 certified, so it has complete protection against dust and moisture. And due to the aluminum backplate that it has, it can support from -40 all the way to 149 degrees Fahrenheit in terms of operating temperature range. So it's got a very wide temperature range compared to the competition. Okay, and then this is our wire portfolio, and you can really see here, we've got the whole range for the small to medium-sized business, from unmanaged all the way to 10 gig stackable. So I would say as a good starting point, you always want to start with the 1930 series. It's going to be your best bang per buck in terms of performance and value, and also in PoE functionality. But if you've got really high demands where you really need, the ultimate in 10 gig performance for the wire backbone, then you can start looking at our 1960 series, which has 10 gig stacking, and also it's more flexible because it has 10 gig copper and 10 gig fiber options inside the switch. It also does have one particular switch that acts as a 10 gig aggregator. So again, if you need the ultimate in 10 gig performance, I would look at the 1960 series. Otherwise, the 1930 series is usually our best seller and where people start. And then from there, if you're more budget constrained, that's when you can start looking at the 1830 series and the 1430 series. I would say that the biggest difference between the 1830 series and the 1930 series is in the way we execute the PoE. In the 1830 series, you're only going to get PoE support on half of the ports, while on the 1930 series, you're going to get PoE support on all of the ports. You'll still run into your total PoE budget as a limiting factor on how many devices you can power, but convenience-wise, on a 1930 series, you're not going to have to think about which port you're plugging into to get PoE functionality. For an 1830 series, you just have to make sure that you're plugging into the half that supports PoE. So it's a bit more inconvenient when you're designing, but if you design it well, you can save a bit of money with the 1830 series over the 1930 series. And we also have we also have instant-on branded transceivers. So we highly recommend that if you need a transceiver, whether you're using a direct attached cable to connect two 1930s together, or whether you need fiber options to get more distance between switches, we highly recommend that you use our instant-on transceivers as well. They're fully validated to work with our instant-on switches. We don't do anything to block third-party transceivers, but if you run into any issues, any link stability issues or anything like that, our tech support team will not be able to help you. But if you do run into those type of issues with our branded transceivers, they'll be able to assist you. Okay, so with that, I'm going to jump into 3.2. So for those of you who are completely new to Instant-On, you may not realize, and if you didn't join our previous webinars, we've had a webinar on 3.1 and also 3.0, which are our previous releases. And so I do want to kind of summarize what we've done with 3.0, because that was quite a huge milestone for us. We completely revamped the user interface. We made it a lot easier to see the network health at a glance, especially if you're managing multiple sites. So that was a huge improvement for us for 3.0. And then the other thing that we added in 3.0 that was pretty big was the ability to have different types of accounts to log in and manage the network sites. Previously, we had an administrator account that can do everything, which essentially is a super user account, and you can have 3 per network site, right? So those users basically do anything and everything they wanted to in those network sites. But now we've got 4 different types of accounts, which I'll go over in the next slide here. So as you can see, we not only have the administrator account, but we also have an operator account, which is a small step down from the administrator account. We have a delegate account that can have access to some configuration on the network site, but not everything. And then we've got a viewer account, which is the most limited, right? Where you can just view the network site, but you can't do anything else. So I want to mention this because it's really, really important now that we're post 3.0 that if you've got multiple users managing network sites, I highly recommend that you give them the appropriate account level, right? According to their experience and the access level that you want them to have. Every buddy should have their own user account for administering the network. And you can have up to 25 now, 25 user accounts per network site. So that's my first tip, to make sure that you give somebody the appropriate level of access. So if you've got an end user that wants visibility into their network, but they don't know anything about networking, you probably don't want to give them anything other than a viewer account, right? And then if you're an IT administrator and you want to give your second in command an account, maybe you either want to give them an administrator account or even an operator account that's a bit more limited. So it's up to you to make those decisions on what kind of accounts you can give to your team and to the end user. But I highly recommend that you give everybody an account, because with 3.1, we implemented an event log per network site. So now you can actually see who is logging into your networks and seeing what changes that they've made at a really high level. So for auditing purposes, if you want to track what somebody is doing within the network sites, you can do that now. You can actually see the email that they're logging in from. Whereas before, if you're sharing accounts, you wouldn't be able to see that kind of granularity, which is great. The other tip that I want to mention is, and this is for the scenario where, for example, let's say you're an administrator and you've created 25 network sites. If you intentionally or unintentionally delete your administrator cloud account, what happens to those 25 network sites is that they essentially get deleted and released back into the cloud. And from there, you can either reconfigure or you can reposition those products for a newer site somewhere else. That's always an option too. But the issue with that is that if you did it unintentionally, then those 25 network sites will be disrupted, right? Because they're essentially getting reset and released back into the cloud for reconfiguration. And that may be not what you intend or would want to happen. So my second very, very important tip of the day is that if you are creating sites and you've got one administrator account that initially creates those sites, I highly recommend that at the end of the workflow, after you're done with your configuration, that you actually add a second administrator to that account as a backup backstop. So what that will allow you to do is that once you have that second account administrator created and added that to all of your network sites, now you've got 2 administrators per network site. And if anything happens to the main administrator, if that main administrator account gets deleted, that network site will still be intact because you've got that second backup administrator on the network. So highly recommend that you do that. This backup account may not be an account that you log in at all. It just used as this backup. And if that's the case, then I highly recommend that you enable multi-factor authentication to secure it, right? Because if you're not interacting with that account on a daily basis, you want to make sure that it's just highly secure, right? Versus an account that you are using on a daily basis, you'll be able to see in the audit, when you're logging in and you're keeping an eye on it. But for a backup kind of backstop administrator account that you're not looking at all the time, yeah, make sure that you're using MFA. I mean, I would recommend using MFA regardless, just for extra security. I do use that on my own account even, but especially so for a backup account that you're not exactly looking at every day. So that's kind of my tip that I wanted to share with everybody for anybody who's using S1 today. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into the new features on 3.2. The first feature is maintenance mode for the sites. So now if you're performing any kind of maintenance at the physical location of a network site, you can turn a mode on for the site called maintenance mode, and that will essentially mute all of the notifications for that site. So for example, if you're changing service providers or if you're upgrading equipment or moving equipment around and there's going to be disruption to the network, you can now put the mode or put the site in maintenance mode before you do that. So that way you won't be flooding, all of the users that are attached to the account with notifications that, devices are down or what have you. And then once you're done with that maintenance, you can simply turn the maintenance mode off and then notifications will resume again after that normally. So here's what it looks like in the web portal. Again, it's very easy. You can just turn it on or off. And you can see here on the upper right-hand corner, there's permissions, right? Where we can assign this feature to specific users, but other users can't use it. So I just want to make sure that you keep that in mind. I talked about, the different levels of access you can give a user for a network site. A lot of these features that we're adding today will have that position where we are only allowing that feature for an administrator and operator and not for a delegate and viewer, or the feature may be just open to all accounts. So just keep that in mind. Okay, and this is what it'll look like in the dashboard when the site's under maintenance. So it's very easy to see. And then of course, when you turn it off, that maintenance logo will not be there. Okay, next feature, enable and disable networks per radio. So when you're creating a wireless network site in our cloud portal, you have the ability to assign which access points are broadcasting that SSID that you created. You can create up to 8 SSIDs for each network site. But now what we've allowed you to do is if you want to completely disable the broadcasting on a particular radio, on a particular access point, you can do that as well. So it's really just another way of slicing and dicing your broadcasting for SSIDs. Okay. And this is what it looks like on the mobile app as well. So you have that capability to do that on the mobile app. Okay, the next feature is reset client devices. So when you look at your client list in the cloud, we will use whatever default name that we can grab from the device, but you have the ability to rename those devices, right? So like in my home network, I'm renaming all of my devices just so it's easier to see what it is. Like with my printer, it grabbed kind of a really generic name that doesn't make any sense, but I've renamed it to printer so I know what it is when I'm looking at the client list. So I encourage everybody, to do those type of things too, to make it much easier to filter through your client list. But if there's any reason that you want to default back to what it grabbed initially from the device, then you can do that, and you can just click kind of this little icon next to the name, and it will go back to the original default, which is nice. We've also added a new feature where we send you a notification when an alert clears. So when a situation arises, say for example, you have a device that's offline, you're going to get a notification that the access point is offline or the switch is offline, but you're not going to get a notification when that device comes back online, right? So now if you want to also see that particular scenario where you get a notification when the product is back online, That way you know that you don't need to address it anymore or what have you. You have the option. You can enable it here per network site. So just enable network notify when a situation clears. You'll get an additional notification when the condition clears. Okay. Port isolation and protected port. So this is on our switches for the 1930s and above. If you suspect, and this is actually a feature that's already been in the switch if you're managing it in local mode, but we haven't exposed it in cloud mode until now. So if you suspect that there's traffic going on between two ports that's not that's maybe an attack or something that's not valid, what you can basically do is you can place those two ports into port isolation or protected port mode. What that means is that any protected port can send traffic to an unprotected port, but any protected port cannot send traffic to another protected port. So for example, if you've got traffic going on between port 2 and 4, and you suspect that it's some kind of attack or something that you don't want happening, then you essentially turn on protected port for port 2, you turn on protected port for port 4, and they won't be able to communicate with each other any longer. And this particular configuration supersedes any other configuration in the switch. So it's a really easy way for you to kind of stop traffic between two particular ports if you see something going on that shouldn't be happening. And this is where you go in the switch, you click on the port, and now you have an option to enable port isolation or protected port for that particular port. Okay, next is cable test for switch. So now you can perform a cable test from the cloud. And for a cable test, a virtual cable test, this is a really good way for you to kind of gauge what the distance is on the line with a device that's connected to it, to a switch port. And in case you are not aware, right, the Ethernet standard is 100 meters. So anything beyond 100 meters, your line quality goes down severely. And I would actually argue that 100 meters is the theoretical, but what I've seen in the real world is that maybe around 70 to 80 meters is kind of the sweet spot, because you never know what kind of quality you're getting with the cable unless you really have confidence in the cabling that you're buying. And then also, running the line, having to deal with environmental issues as well, temperature, what have you. All of that can kind of affect the performance of the Ethernet line. So from what I've seen, especially if you're using power over Ethernet, you definitely don't want to go towards the max of the Ethernet standard, right? Because you're going to start seeing errors in that case. So this cable test, if you suspect that you're having issues with the cable line, this cable test is a good way as a starting point to get some information on whether the line is good or not. And you can initiate it through the web portal or the mobile app. And these are the possible results that you can get when you're enabling the cable test, right? So I think this is a good starting point. And from here, if you suspect that this gives you kind of a direction on whether there's issues on the line, then there's obviously no replacement for a really good fluke tester, right? That can give you even more details on the line quality. Okay, and then we also added traceroute to our switches. So now you can conduct a traceroute. So if you suspect that there's a particular route that's not that's really got high latency, you can kind of test that now within the switch to a IP address, and you can see all the hops in between. So that's really nice to be able to do that in the cloud. So it's kind of a good way to test like the hop to your router, or maybe a hop beyond your router, so you can kind of see whether it's an issue with service provider or something in between. Okay, and that's it for 3.2. Thanks everyone for joining. I hope that was informative. And with that, I will pass it back to you, Julie, for Q&A.
Thank you very much, David. We appreciate it. Enjoyed that presentation. And of course, I've got some audience questions for you. Let's get started with the first one. Here we go. Can you tell us, are there any new hardware requirements for this update of the Instant on 3.2?
No, so it should be absolutely free for all of our products. It will include an upgrade on the access points and the switches. And also, if you're using the mobile app, you will be required to update the mobile app as well in order to see all the new features. Actually, one nuance that I want to bring up, and this is kind of different from what we've done in the past, is that if you're using the previous 3.1 mobile app, normally it would ask you just to update that app to 3.2, but there were some technical details where we had to release it as a completely new app. So you'll be presented to install the 3.2 version of the app that looks exactly the same as the previous app, but it won't be an upgrade to the previous app. So you can actually have both apps at the same time. So I recommend that you essentially install the new app, which is 3.2, and then just delete the 3.1 app. So I know that's a little bit inconvenient compared to the way that we did it before, but that's kind of what we had to do with this particular release. So apologies on that. But as far as the web portal, you don't have to worry about that. For the web portal, it's simply just logging in and you'll be fine. And then yes, you'll have to update the access points and the switches. It'll probably take just a few minutes. And if you have any concerns about that update, you have the ability to push out the update for up to 4 weeks. We started rolling out this update, I think, mid-March. So you still probably have a couple more weeks to go if you've extended that, that maintenance window. And then it will auto upgrade everything in your site depending on the day and the default time that you've set per network site.
Excellent. Thank you for that, David. Next question here. How is AI being utilized in HP Instant On 3.2 for network optimization if you are using AI?
So right now we don't have any kind of service level AI features in Instant On. We're always thinking about it. So it's definitely a part of our roadmap journey. I would say that right now, though, we don't have anything kind of in the pipeline for it. But there could be things like in the background that we're just unaware of that they're optimizing with AI. But once we get more kind of surface level AI features, like things that will help you troubleshoot more automatically, then I think that's something that we could definitely present in a webinar like this. Right now, when we display conditions that are happening in the network site, that could potentially be powered by AI in the back end, right? Giving you those suggestions and giving you those condition alerts. But I would say for anything that's really kind of surface level AI, we don't have anything just yet, but stay tuned because we are thinking about it.
Thank you, David. That sounds good. Obviously, the time will come when we can talk about it on a webinar. So looking forward to that. Okay, let's see. Next question here for you, David. Can admins now set more granular access controls?
So right now we have those 4 accounts that I mentioned earlier: the administrator, the operator, the delegate, and the viewer. So if you are the administrator for a network site, then you basically have the ability to invite up to 25 or I would say 24, right, including yourself, 25 other users to the network site, and that's where you can delegate their access level. So that's one way. The other thing with the delegate account, right, that has access to some configuration and not everything, our vision for the delegate account, it's not that way today, but our vision for that is to allow you to customize, with more granularity, what that delegate account can configure and what it can't. So right now, it's a bit hard-coded on what it can configure and what it can't. But the vision for that particular delegate account is that we'll make it more granular and more customizable in the future.
Thank you, David. Next question here for you. You've got 2 more. Here this one goes. Is Instant On 3.2 backward compatible with older HP Instant On devices?
Yeah, so right now 3.2 is supported on all of our devices. So all of our Wi-Fi 5, Wi-Fi 6 access points, all of our existing portfolio really. I will mention though that the way that we approach the cloud compared to some of our competitors where everything's locally managed, we really do want you to be on the latest and greatest software at all times. In terms of the security posture, that's just going to be the best move, because we do have cybersecurity threat teams on the enterprise side that are constantly looking at threats. So all of that experience and all of those patches are getting ported into Instant-On all the time, and we want you to be on those latest releases. So that's the reason why when you're cloud managing our devices, we only allow you to push out the firmware update for 4 weeks max, but then eventually you'll need to get there. So there's really no concept of rolling back firmware. And again, I know that there's some anxiety with that, but what I would say is that because of the testing and the validation that we do on the enterprise side that gets ported to the Instant-On, we rarely, I mean, never say never, but we rarely have issues with our products when they are launched or when they're updated on the Instant-On portfolio compared to our competitors. So we really kind of pride ourselves in that. So I know there's some anxiety that people want to be able to control what firmware that they're on and not have to upgrade. But really, we're trying to make it as simple as possible to have you have the highest security posture for your network.
Thank you, David. Last question, and it leads right into something you just touched on. How does HPE plan to handle bug fixes and future updates?
Right, so that's a great question. And funny enough, we enhanced the way we approach that post 3.0. So before, we would like to have 3 to 4 major releases a year, and we would have to roll up all of the bug fixes for those 3 to 4 major releases, right? So if you think of our release schedule as maybe 1 per quarter, then at most it would take 3 months for you to get kind of the next batch of bug fixes. But with 3.0 and on, we've actually made it much easier for us to roll out maintenance software. So if you look at a major release, it'll usually be 3.0, 3.1, 3.2. Now, if you see something like 3.2.1, 3.2.5, or something along those lines, those are actually bug fix maintenance releases that we don't have to wait for a major release for. So to answer your question, we've shortened the window that we have in releasing maintenance fixes.
Excellent. Thank you, David, for answering all of those questions. And also, thank you to everyone for attending today's webinar. And if anyone has any further questions, please feel free to contact your sales rep or email us at sales@microcomtech.com. And if you wish to view any of the products mentioned or shown today, just remember this webinar presentation has been recorded and we'll all be able to upload it we'll all be able to see it again after it's been uploaded to our Microcom YouTube channel, which it will be later today. David, thank you so very much for your time and all of this valuable information. We look forward to the next one with you. So everybody, have a fantastic day.
All right, thanks, Julie. Thank you, everyone.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.